2:30. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. Go live. Okay. Yeah. That's a stream. Just start stream.
Is it doing a little countdown?
I'll take a picture though. Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
We're live. Are we? Yeah, we are. Okay. Ready.
Hello. Hi, everyone. This is a really great occasion for us.
It's happening here. Yeah, I think it's fine.
Just making sure everything is set up. We're here with Jasmin Kent Rodgman to talk about her piece, which she wrote for us in the From Home commissions. And actually, this is a new step for us because previously we've been doing all the meetings on Zoom, but we're actually here in the same room.
And
so
YouTube live.
Yeah, and YouTube live.
Oh, tick marks.
Exactly. Every new skill is like a next level for us. So thanks, Jasmin, for being part of this today.
No, thank you.
We wanted to just open up with the question of your work, which has a very interesting title, Where the Conflict Ends. And can you tell us a little bit more about how you came up with this idea and what it means to you?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I have to give props to the title is taken from a poem that ties in with the sort of themes and thoughts I had as I was writing this piece, and the poem is called Where the Conflict Ends. And I'll come back to that in a second. But I guess, you know, when you guys got in touch, I don't know, we're sort of still in the tail end of it, aren't we? I keep on forgetting this, but you know, we were discussing about, you could just write a piece about anything. But at the time, I just felt there was just this sense of frustration. There'd been a lot happening on the news to do with, like, you know, violence against women, and we're obviously still in the middle of it, but we just come off the back of a year where there were so many protests about, you know, anti-racist protests, Black Lives Matter, George Floyd's death, etc. And there was just, and then also the sort of third layer was this discussion about violence against women and also the representation of women of color in the media, you know, and it's all very serious, really. So I realized I wrote quite a depressing piece. But yeah, this sense of frustration was sort of bubbling at the surface, and I wanted to write a string quartet and just channel that energy into a piece that isn't entirely doom and gloom. I think that the piece itself goes on a journey of sort of this sense of the sort of oppression of silence, really. You know, there's this sort of tension bubbling to the surface where I ask you guys in the quartet to sort of make these sort of white noise vocal sounds that eventually become this sort of roaring, sort of strangled scream. And then the piece sort of lifts off from there, doesn't it? But it sort of unwinds as it reaches its end into something that's a bit more mellow and seems like an odd place, I guess, to take a piece to and stop and end it with. But the reason for that is that despite all of the sort of very heavy things I just mentioned, I do think it is sort of magical, the things that we hold in ourselves and in our bodies, and particularly the things that women and women of color hold within their bodies. And the poem that I just referenced by Lisa Lux, who's an incredible poet, the sort of final lines of that poem read, I've got it here, and you should all buy Lisa Lux's chapbook, Trust Your Outrage, which is fantastic. And the last line reads, in our bodies, the world comes together. Our bodies are a prayer for peace. And so I do think there's a positive journey and a way out of these things. But at the time, it felt that we were sort of here at sort of not quite rock bottom, but pretty low. So yeah, that's the sort of impetus behind the piece, I guess. Yeah.
It's very interesting. We felt very much, it's interesting, the journey of the piece felt very much from starting from far away from our comfort zone and ending somewhere, a place as a quartet that we felt a little more comfortable. So
Yeah.
the harmonies and the gestures at the end were ones that we felt more relaxed with, more comfortable with. And at the beginning, we had to really work at the sounds and the colors
Yeah.
and thinking about the timbre that you wanted. When you're imagining these kind of colors at the beginning, as you say, it's leading up to this scream and the really angular rhythms that you have in the middle of the piece, how do you sort of go about thinking of those and the journey of the piece? Do you have a sort of construction in your head, or how do you think of those?
I guess I tend to think quite visually, so I often think in sort of blocks and imagery that inspires me. So the beginning, quite literally the things that I'm holding in my head are sort of those sounds, those vocal sounds are sort of what with a starting point. And then I sort of try to build out of the strings that sort of white noise tension of the voice when you have that sort of silent scream. So that's how I really thought and tried to build, that's what I built the color and the timbre around. And for me as well, there was something in my mind about sort of skin, when you're sort of uncomfortable, you fidget. Those sorts of very sort of visceral sounds. So those were the things that really inspired that opening of the piece, really. Yeah, and then from the scream, I mean, it was quite literally a blood-curdling scream that was the inspiration, which I think everybody will understand when they hear you launch into that part of the piece. So yeah, that's sort of how I tend to start my ideas. Actually, it's very visual. It's visual and sonic, but not necessarily sort of notes first. Yeah, that's how it goes.
And it's really nice to hear your influences, like from a poet or something. But I'd like to hear what sort of, not necessarily musical influences, but what do you like to listen to when you're sort of relaxing, or what would you put on if you had some time off, you wanted to listen to something?
If I had some time off.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I was like looking into the distance, a dream far away. At the moment, what I tend to be doing, and I've admitted this more recently, is I go for utter escapism. So it's not what you would expect. It's actually very, very different. I tend to, when I've got some time off, I love watching anime, and at the moment that I really do, because I'd never write music like that. This sort of, there's a lot of like Japanese pop and rock music in it, and total fantasy, obviously, because it's animation. So at the moment, that's actually what I've been leaning into is anime and Korean drama on Netflix. If I'm brutally honest with you, that's what I'm doing at the moment. So yeah.
Brutally honest is great. We love brutally honest. It's much more interesting. It's great. You have to give us a few links to
tips what to watch.
I will. There you go. I'll put that on Twitter after this live session. So yeah, I'll give you my top 5 anime.
Great.
Thank you for writing such a great work, which is so reflected on your personal story of pandemic and all that. So so inspiring that you are so honest to write what you experience and where you are. So what your recent or maybe current work you're working, or what are you on the
what am I working on at the moment?
on the plate?
Well, I just came off the back of a theatre project called Missing Julie, which is open at the moment, but up in Mold in North Wales, at Theatre Clwyd, if anybody knows Theatre Clwyd. And it's an adaptation of Strindberg's Miss Julie, of which there have been many adaptations. And it's a really interesting story. It's a sort of it's a love story, but it's also a drama based around sort of social climbing and politics and class. And especially in this adaptation, Kate O'Reilly, the writer, is very focused on disability in the arts. So our male protagonist is a phenomenal actor, an amputee, and it's set around the First World War and looking at, he's a sort of servant in the manor and he falls in love with the mistress, Miss Julie. So it's it's a fantastic drama directed by Chelsea Walker. So that's on at the moment. And I guess the other thing at the moment, I'm just finishing Something with Shadwell Opera. Shout out to Shadwell Opera. It's going to be a sort of a digital commission. I don't think they've really announced it yet, so I'm not sure how much I can say about it. But it's a very exciting, very tiny, short miniature opera piece about the future and time travel. There you go.
That's exciting.
That's exciting.
So do you lean, I know we should probably finish now, but I just wanted to quickly ask, do you lean towards the sort of the theatre and opera generally? Do you feel at the moment that's where you're excited to write music for?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if anybody's familiar with my work, I do tend to, do sort of cross arts collaboration. And at the moment, I think theatre and opera is where I've found myself, interestingly, over the last year and a half, which is not where I expected to be. I've sort of lent into film quite a lot, I think, because that's sort of digitally accessible over the last year and a half. But yeah, I think it's just really interesting. I'm just finding storytelling to be extremely interesting at the moment. And one way of obviously doing that is through theatre and bringing on so many partners. I mean, it's a huge machine. And I've got incredible respect now for people who, produce it on the go, and organisations who've had to, put up with the last year and a half. But yeah, theatre and opera, big storytelling. It's exciting. I think a lot of people have got a lot of exciting things to say. So that's the real positive. I think over the next year, we'll see all those voices, coming to the fore and hearing all of these wonderful stories, which I think is what we need after such a weird and wonderful year. And that's why From Home, I should end with something about From Home. From Home was so wonderful. Thank you. You guys have been such incredible sports. You've really put your heart and soul into those screams, which everybody should appreciate, and the filming as well. And I really love how you've embraced it. So even though there are heavy topics behind it, I've had such a blast, and it is theatrical. I think that's part of a performance, especially string quartet performances. I find, the sort of the relationship between all four of you, and the way it's come together is phenomenal. So I'm really excited to see it tonight.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jasmin. This is Jasmin Kent Rodgman, and the performance is 7 p.m. tonight. Looking forward to seeing you there. Bye.
Great.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
You can end that.